Guys, welcome to the I Love CVille Show. My name is Jerry Miller. Thank you kindly for joining us a rainy Wednesday, but the rain will not impact our positivity nor our outlook on life. It is a great day to be above the mud. We're live in Charlottesville, across the Commonwealth, the country, and the world. It's an absolute pleasure to connect with you guys through the I Love CVille Network. We'll thank some of our partners on the show. Ting Fiber Internet is the crazy fast internet that makes the I Love CVille Show possible. Dr. Scott Wagner of Scott Wagner Integrated Medicine is changing people's lives with this integrated medicine hospital and clinic, guys. And of course, our newest partner is Skooma Boutique Dispensary on the Charlottesville Downtown Mall. CBD and Delta 8 are all the rage. It's important when navigating this new world of CBD and Delta 8 that you understand what you're taking. And David and his team at Skooma have certificates of analyses for everything in the store. They're honest, they work hard, and they play it the right way at Skooma Boutique Dispensary. Judah Wickhauer's our North Star. Judah, why don't we go to the studio camera first so folks can see the boardroom table, and then let's welcome Lee Elberson, the man, to the program as Darren Picciotti. Is that right?
Pashota.
Pashota.
Yeah, Pashota.
He says Lee Elberson is the man, big heart, big brain, and a downright fun dude. Darren, I could not say it any better. Que pasa, Lee Elberson? How are you?
You know, been an interesting couple weeks since I've gotten back from Ireland, but happy to be in Charlottesville. This is the best time to be in Charlottesville. Fall in Charlottesville, I think, is the best.
Why don't we start there? You and your beautiful better half, you outkicked your coverage. I'll say that.
100%.
Outkicked your coverage. You guys make a trip across the pond for a wedding to Ireland. Show is yours.
Yeah, you remember, we talked about this on the show. I was very apprehensive first of all, to travel. I think there's a lot of anxiety right now happening in travel. I think I just saw that anxiety amongst travelers in public transportation and airplanes is up 70% over the pre-COVID numbers. So there's a lot of stress. And then just not knowing what we're going into. The U.S. and the CDC rates Ireland as a level 4, which was do not travel. I think I have a little bit of a bone to pick because when I started doing some research, what made me feel better a few days going into it was that their vaccination rates I think they're at 90% now, but they were at about 85% when we traveled. Getting there was very easy. We took a nonstop from Dulles. And, I think once we got there, what made me feel much better is that they require proof of vaccination. Pretty much every restaurant. If you're going to go inside, you got to require proof of vaccination. And they do contact tracing. You leave your name and phone number. In case there was an outbreak, they know who to contact. And that just showed that they were taking it seriously. And then when you stop back and look, you realize that the economy is starting to boom there. When you take these safety precautions, it was very easy. And so we felt very safe. On top of that, I was really worried about what to eat. Alex and I eat mostly vegan. We've just introduced eggs into our diet. And I was thinking, Ireland is like haggis and blood sausage, right? I don't know, for some reason that's in my mind was like what everywhere was going to be serving. But
was that the case?
No, actually, no? They had vegan options almost everywhere.
So much.
And it was awesome. The people there were very nice to Americans, which if you've ever traveled to Europe is not a very common sentiment. Everything was green. Obviously, it's the Emerald Islands. Stuff grows everywhere. And, I think nice people, good food, and good scenery just made it for a great place to go. It was interesting speaking with some of the Irish citizens, and I think this brings up a national conversation we have here in the States. They asked a lot about our vaccines. The U.S. is now starting to ship vaccines to other places because we're not seeing enough Americans take it, and they kept asking, do they publish scientific studies in the U.S. that show the efficacy and why you should get the vaccine? And I kept having to explain to them it's not that's not there. It's a different issue we face in the U.S. in terms of how people view COVID vaccination. And
it's not as politicized.
It's not as politicized.
Is that fair?
There. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a public health crisis, and people are understanding that the government is putting in place these policies so that you can get the death toll under control. You want to make sure that the citizens are as safe as possible. And two, it's economic. I think part of the reason in the U.S. why we didn't want to place these restrictions in the first place is because we didn't want businesses to suffer. But I think they played more of a long game. You get most of the population vaccinated early on, and then the economy can get restarted much earlier.
Can we go down that road? Because
Sure.
you know me, and many folks that know me that watch the show, as a staunch libertarian. Okay?
Fiscally conservative.
And socially liberal.
Yeah.
Okay? I don't want the government telling me what to do. And my mindset shifted when it came to the vaccination. As someone like you who's a champion of small business, Main Street over Wall Street, I started realizing that freedom and what being a libertarian is all about is this vaccination. While we have the feds, heck, 10 days ago, last week, Biden goes on in a global press conference saying he's going to mandate the vaccine. While we have the government essentially mandating this vaccination, my mind is this vaccine is going to allow entrepreneurial freedom and empower Main Street to get back the new sense of normalcy. And it took me a while to get there because I don't like folks telling me what to do. Especially not the federal government. But with that mindset change and that clarity, I keep saying this, and I catch some heat for this on the program all the time. The vaccine is going to lead us to entrepreneurial and small business freedom.
Yeah, I think I 100% agree, and I think you're in a unique position where you can see both sides, and I think it's important to hear people's frustrations about why they don't want to get the vaccine. And there's a couple of really interesting publications coming out. In the New York Times has published an article, and there's been a few others out. I think the Daily Progress has also published this as well. But in general, I think that the people who are against vaccines generally fall under two groups. You could call them, anti-vaxxers, which is like, I don't trust the government, right? Like, I'm not going to get it. It infringes on my rights, and that's why I don't want to get it. And then you have, I think, a different population, which is vaccine hesitant, saying, hey, I'm actually worried about side effects. I think this is too new, and, I'm just not convinced of the science. And I think if you look at it, those populations are probably significantly different. Not that you shouldn't listen to both of those arguments, but in the latter group, the vaccine hesitant, I think there's a pretty large population of people of color that have very specific concerns of, well, if I take the second dose, I'm going to be out of work for a day. What are my out-of-pocket costs? And so I think that there are some real concerns, and what's helpful from somebody who has been vaccinated, and I would say as a vaccine advocate, is to always hear those concerns. I think the political movement has forced us to sort of separate, and it's like people who are vaccine advocates are fighting QAnon, right? It's like not everybody who doesn't want to get a vaccine thinks that they're implanting a microchip in your arm, right? But it's easy to polarize people by stating that those are the two populations.
How do you think this whole pandemic, wearing masks, vaccinations, and managing COVID and Delta in this pandemic, how different would it have been if it had not have happened during this Trump-Biden election year?
Yeah, I mean, leadership plays a big part in in helping to collect followers. So I think had we taken a different tack, I don't think we would have had as high a vaccination rates as a place like Ireland, for instance. I think a lot of it is because our country is relatively new, and we founded this country on fighting for our independence and getting away from government control. And so I think there was always going to be a fair amount of resistance. And so I think you would have definitely lowered the anti-vax population, saying this is a global pandemic, and every country in the world is we're all doing the same thing to get over this crisis. So I think that would have gone down, and even vaccine hesitancy, I think probably would have gone down as well. what's fighting this that doesn't necessarily have to do with leadership is the social media engine, and all it takes is a few people who claim to be an expert say one thing in a video on Facebook and you get followers, and that's all people are going to remember. I was trying to think about it the other day when I was having a conversation with my mom, and she mentioned a peer-reviewed journal article, and I remember thinking, I wonder how many of the general population has ever read a peer-reviewed journal article. Probably not many. They're pretty dense. There's a lot involved in them. It's a lot easier to look at a video and say, I trust that person, sounds like they know what they're talking about. So I think under better leadership, I certainly think we would have had better vaccination rates, instilled more confidence in why we wear masks and have worn masks in the medical industry for century now, and then why the vaccine rollout is going to help our economy recover. So I think it certainly would have helped under different leadership.
Do you feel more confident of pandemic management heading into the fourth quarter? Last time we had you on the show, I think, was 30 plus days ago, and we were in the midst of an outbreak.
Yeah.
The Delta was gaining tremendous momentum. Do we feel more confident now? Do you?
Definitely. I think we are learning. Some of the top scientists in the country are spending 10 hours a day focusing on understanding the spread of this virus and containment and how to tackle this problem on a scale of hundreds of millions of people. So I definitely feel better. In fact, when we talked about our over-under about schools going virtual, I'm now thinking, I think we could actually probably make it to Christmas without having to go full virtual.
So you think it's Christmas?
I'm for once on this show, I'm very
You're bullish.
I'm bullish about the outcome here. I think, hey, we're actually looking up.
So your prediction is then Thanksgiving, Hanukkah, Christmas, family gatherings inside, trepidation, January.
Yep. And also, CDC is giving the same guidance as they did last year. Hey, we all want to have big gatherings, but the best thing to do right now is to just have small gatherings with people that you already live with. And I think, people are starting to understand that, and we're starting to look at the big picture and say, hey, we'll do Thanksgiving big next year. So best thing to do right now is to get over this hump and prevent outbreaks.
Our buddy Scott Williams is watching. We love you, Scott Williams. Scott Williams is going to come on the show. Jeep Vader, a testament to Lee Elberson and Alex Jeep, that has its own Instagram handle, Jeep Vader. I follow Jeep Vader.
I know you always like our posts.
In fact, I only follow 48 people, and one of them is Jeep Vader on Instagram. One of them is Jeep Vader. Scott Williams says Lee is an amazing mentor and friend and an average Mario Kart player.
Okay, you know what? Tell him he loves telling that story. Yeah, he completely obliterated me. But, he hasn't given me a rematch, so I think he's a little bit scared.
Lee is an extremely alpha competitive man as as you can tell. The cool thing about this program, guys, is you can offer your comments in the feed, and we will relay them on air to our guests. You can also change the pace and tempo of the program with questions and perspective. Put them in any social media platform you're watching, and I will source them here on the program. A lot of folks in California watching the program, some folks in Louisiana on the feed right now. What do you make of, let's talk schools. School's one of your fortes. I'll cut to the chase. We had Bob Warren on the program and Earl Smith on the program, and both gentlemen are employees of Albemarle County Schools. Bob Warren works in the schools, managing in school suspension or detention, doing coaching, managing the traffic flow. Earl Smith, the school bus driver. I got a message from Mr. Bob Warren. It's a little bit of a sad story here. Facebook message from Mr. Warren yesterday. Friday, he's terminated. And he's terminated because he is unwilling to get vaccinated. And he says that it is his constitutional rights to determine what he is going to do with his body and what he injects into his body. I see that side. I 100% see that side. Okay? I'm empathetic to his plight. Albemarle County's got a vaccination mandate public school system. And he works for Albemarle County. That's his employer. And they gave him a deadline to get this vaccination. And on Friday, because he's not getting vaccinated, he's getting terminated. What do you make of this?
Yeah, it's. I think I'll keep going back to this. It's important to be empathetic to what both sides are feeling. I think from Bob's standpoint, he sounds like he's just hesitant. He's not sure he wants to take on any potential health risks of getting the vaccine. From Albemarle County School side, they are trying to protect the safety of all of their employees. As somebody who has had to manage these gatherings of large people of unknown vaccination status, if there's one unvaccinated person in the group, they put everybody else at risk, because vaccination doesn't mean you're never going to get it. It just lowers that probability. And if I'm somebody I'm vaccinated, I've got a newborn, I'm very concerned, I've got an elderly parent in hospice, I can't take any chances. I need to minimize my chances at all. And so I'm looking to my employer to say, please don't put me at risk, okay? If something happens to my child or my parents, I'm going to be absolutely devastated. I'm charging you with protecting my safety. And that's what the Albemarle County is looking at, and that's what many organizations are looking at. Vaccination requirements aren't new, and I think we talked about this before. Neither is seatbelt requirements. Maybe there's some argument as to, hey, I drive a Jeep. Maybe there's some case where if I get into an accident, I'd prefer to not have my seatbelt on because maybe I can jump out the door faster. But statistics show that the best way to preserve your life and to preserve the life of others is to have a seatbelt on. So that analogy is not a perfect analogy, but that's what's happening here. And so again, just trying to be sympathetic to both sides, but again, looking at why are organizations, big schools, putting in vaccination mandates. It's a liability issue for you. They have to think about the safety of all of their employees, and the best way to keep their safety is to have a vaccine mandate.
Judah Wickower is our director. Judah, if you can go to the studio camera, our friend Neil Williamson is watching, the president of the Free Enterprise Forum. I would love to show Neil Williamson the boardroom table here. Neil, take a look at the screen. He's got comments for Lee Elberson as well. Mark McKinney watching the program. Mark McKinney is of the Crozet Community Advisory Committee, and he's got some comments for us as well. So Neil, we can't wait to have you back on the show. Same with you, Mark McKinney. Neil Williamson from the Wall Street Journal, Lee. Thanksgiving week bookings are now 35.5% higher than at the same point in 2019, according to Jamie Lane, Vice President of Research at analytics firm AirDNA. And then he includes a link to the source from the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah, that's bookings for what, residences?
Thanksgiving week bookings are, Neil, give us a little more intel.
Yeah,
I would imagine that's probably air travel, right?
Air travel, okay.
Yeah.
And that's over 2019 numbers. So yeah, taking it pre-pandemic numbers. Yeah, I mean, I think we're probably going to see some sort of hysteresis effect where people have been hunkered down for so long that the first chance they feel like where there's a dip in COVID numbers, we feel confident about traveling, feel like we have a better handle on it. You may see it boom higher than it was before. Maybe that is going to lead to increase in spread of COVID and COVID-related incidents. But yeah, so ask him for more context. I mean, I wasn't aware of that. If it's higher than pre-pandemic numbers, that is surprising.
I would love some more context. We both would. Neil Williamson, we see the link here, but if you could offer a little more perspective, I'll relay that on air. Blake Hawthorne's got comments for us.
Oh, man, Blake, he's smartest guy on the feed, I think.
I'll get to Blake. Wow, that's high praise coming from Lee Elberson.
He's a former roommate of mine, and he is just a very smart dude. Always asks great questions.
Blake Hawthorne is watching where?
Blake's in Woodland, California right now.
Okay, so we got Cali in the house. I see Louisiana, Texas, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and of course a lot of the Commonwealth on our heat map right here. Blake Hawthorne, Republics, this is, wow, get ready for this one right here. I'm like, republics aren't conquered, they crumble from within. The misinformation aspect to the damage being inflicted by the multi-pronged attack on our citizenry through self-serving political personalities, partisan politics hatred, foreign entities creating memes, and internet and news broadcast entities hell-bent on forging and dividing us is catastrophic.
Told you. Smart dude.
Yeah.
He starts it off with, republics crumble from within. Yeah, I mean, I think this is a symptom of how we consume information now. The internet took us out of the age where we had to be educated in schools and we were always seeking out information. Now, there's so information, and what really we're entering in is a filtration age. How do you filter it for relevance? And social media is not a great spot, is a very poor spot to look for relevance. Its main motivator is not to give you relevant information. Its main motivator is to give you information that will keep you on the platform longer or to click longer. And so
Mark Zuckerberg's going through that right now.
Yeah. And I think, again...
And Lee's the only guy I know without a Facebook page. Lee Elberson does not have a personal Facebook page.
Don't have a personal Facebook page. Yeah, I think, it's only a matter of time until you make a similarity between what you read on social media and fact. Again, I always scale back. This is coming from a place of a physicist by training and a true scientist at heart. And it's to understand what science does for the community. People self-select to observe a certain field of science. I observed physics, people observe biology, and immunologists observe bacteria and growth of viruses and things like that. And so we look to them and they present their findings to us in peer-reviewed journal articles. Like I said, those things are very dense, and so then where do we go to sort of curate that? Places like Scientific American are publications that try to break it down, but when you get so far away from that there is no rooting on science, you're just someone who is making a claim, and there's nothing wrong with making a claim, but you need to have some sort of evidence to back this up. And if you ever watch progressive shows like David Pakman, the first thing he asks you to do is to say, state your claim and your sources. And that's, I think, an important part of making any decision, especially a big decision that is something that's way out of our realm of understanding. I couldn't model how the coronavirus spread easily. I tried. Remember at the beginning of the pandemic, I ran those statistics. And that's because I'm just one guy running things on a computer program. So I look to experts to get my information, and I think that's what we should all do. And there's a growing issue in education that students don't understand what sourcing is. Hey, I linked to this Facebook article. That's not an article. That's somebody publishing their opinion on a platform. An article is something that has been peer-reviewed, and there's some sort of stature and sort of review process where people can fact check it. So anyway, rant over.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. We got our friends from NBC 29 and the CVille Weekly on the feed. Judah Wickower is going to try the up-close Zoom cameras now, a new addition to the I Love CVille Network. That's going to be right in front of you there, Lee Elberson. Yes, sir. So Neil's got more context for you, Lee Elberson, than Mark McKinney will get to your comment. We will get to your comment, I promise you. Alex is watching. Hello, Alex. I hear your squash game is quite improving, Alex. I'm excited to see you on the courts.
She's going to be a better match for you than I am pretty soon.
I'm ready.
She's not as competitive as I am. I tell you one thing, I will fight tooth and nail.
Oh, I know that. That's why I enjoy playing with you. Yeah. I like the little bit. I like it where we take it to the point where it's almost at friction point.
Oh yeah.
And then
once we're off, oh, that was out. Don't you try.
And once we're off the court, we're back to being like this.
Yeah.
So here's Neil and Mark McKinney. We'll get to your comments. Leslie, we're going to get to your comments. Lauren will get to your thoughts as well. And Brian, your thoughts. A lot of people watching with Lee Elberson in the mix. So Neil, this is the context you asked for. Wow, that's a really up-close zoom shot right there, Judah, right? Neil Williamson says, more travelers, maybe we go back to the non-zoom shot, right? More travelers plan to fly this Thanksgiving compared with last year when the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recommended Americans avoid Thanksgiving travel. Domestic airline tickets booked from the beginning of the year through September 29 for Thanksgiving week travel are up 51% from 2020 levels. They are down 36% from 2019 levels.
Oh, okay.
Both figures are according to Airlines Reporting Corp, which processes tickets sold by travel agencies.
That makes a lot more sense. I would be very surprised if they were up over pre-pandemic numbers. The fact that they're up over last year, I think speaks to our confidence in understanding how the virus is spread and the precautions necessary to prevent that. Vaccination rates are also up, and so it's less likely that you're going to contract something over last year. We didn't have vaccines out at Thanksgiving last year that were publicly available, and so yeah, that makes perfect sense that they're up over last year and down over the year before. So that context is greatly appreciated, and the fact that they're up 50%, again, CDC is recommending that people stay home. So the fact that they're dropped over 2019 levels, I think, is an indication that that message is being heard. And the fact that it's up over last year also makes sense. I would be very surprised if it were at the same levels as last year. I think travel was very minimal during Thanksgiving last year.
Mark McKinney, Crozet Community Advisory Committee for Lee Elberson. People naturally resist and or question government, from taxes to regulations. The more the government forces the vaccine and people feel their individual choice is being taken away, the people will continue to resist. I very much agree with that statement. Furthermore, for you, Mr. Elberson, the other issue is political behavior during the last 18 months. Terry McAuliffe on a train with no mask. We talked about that on the I Love CVille show. An Amtrak train from Virginia to New York, he was not wearing a mask, where he's a huge proponent of wearing a mask when he's campaigning. That's undoubtedly hypocrisy from the front runner for the governor of Virginia. Furthermore, Mark McKinney for Lee Elberson. He says, Dr. Fauci saying it's too soon to tell if you can be with your families for Christmas. Other politicians not following their own pandemic rules. All the above, in my opinion, Mark McKinney says, pushes those who are hesitant into the realm of, quote, I can't trust you, so I won't take it, end quote. Respect on that.
Thanks so much. That was Mark?
Mark McKinney.
Yeah, that's
he's a leader in Crozet.
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack there. Let's start with the standard that we hold politicians to. So I think there is a certain amount of acceptable behavior of do as I say, not as I do. Me lobbying for something, me lobbying for people to wear masks in public areas is different than me always making sure to adhere to that. And me either forgetting or not doing it is not me having a refusal of that practice. I try to wear my mask when I'm in public areas, when I go to the farmer's market, when I'm in public areas of my business, but I don't always. Sometimes I forget. Sometimes, it irritates my face. I get something like that, and so maybe I don't wear it, but I still want to advocate to wear masks. So I think it's important to make that distinction for Terry McAuliffe. In terms of...
So you call hypocrisy on McAuliffe there?
Mm-mm.
No, you just say McAuliffe made a mistake?
I think there's a certain amount of flexibility that should be granted, and we shouldn't have to hold him to a standard of saying, like, hey, if you believe in this policy, you have to do it 100%. I mean, you would hope as a good leader that you practice what you preach, but again, I think saying if you don't do it if you're caught one time without it, then you're a hypocrite. I think that's a bit extreme.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair. You want me to read the rest of his statement?
Yeah, no, I think the second thing that he mentioned was about the distrust in the government and, pushing a vaccine mandate forces people to be more vaccine hesitant. We're at a point where we're thinking about safety concerns. Certainly there were certain parts of the U.S. that were having serious problems with ICU admittance, and so they're trying to figure out how to control that. And then there is an economic concern that if we can get over this hump and get more people to be vaccinated, that the economy will recover sooner. There's a lot of financial forecasters are worried that something is going to hit the fan in the next 12 to 18 months based on...
You're saying economic recession.
Yeah.
Is that what you're alluding to?
Yeah. Inflation, hyperinflation, there's certainly some crazy thoughts being spun around, and some of them are crazy and some of them I think are a little bit more realistic. But I think vaccine mandates I think it's good for public health. So I'm in support of it.
Lauren's got a comment. Lauren is watching in Richmond, Short Pump area, she says. I enjoy when you have this guest on the show. He backs his statements with facts and analysis. Please ask his perspective. And that's interesting because Darren's got something similar to what Lauren is saying. Darren's watching in California. Lauren's watching in Short Pump. Please, Lauren says, ask your guest perspective on forcing teachers and other frontline workers to get vaccinated and his thoughts on that, because there seems to be some resistance with this. And then Darren, who's in California. Is that family to you?
He's my cousin, yeah.
He's your cousin.
Yeah.
He says, do you feel that nurses, firefighters, and police officers should also be required to get vaccinated? So both Lauren and Darren asking similar questions, and then Darren continues, there's a lot of talk from these groups saying that saying the same things as bus drivers.
Yeah, so I think Darren's got great questions. He comes from fire service leadership.
Santa Clara?
He was in Santa Clara County. Yeah, he retired a couple years ago, but yeah, he was a deputy chief and had a lot of experiences with leadership there. Lauren, I don't know if she's in the education community, but requiring frontline workers and teachers to get vaccinated, again, I try to put this in from a place of empathy. From a teacher standpoint, it sounds like what the school is doing is forcing you to get vaccinated or find another career path.
That's what they're doing, isn't it?
Yeah, because if this school system requires it, it's only a matter of time until many of them start requiring it. So that is that's an impossible decision to be faced with. Get vaccinated or find another career.
In some ways, you can spin that as extortion.
It's putting people to make a decision. So let's talk about the vaccine hesitant population. I think the anti-vax population, I don't know how much consideration that they are going to put to this. I'm not sure what it takes to push those people over the edge and discuss it with them. But I think vaccine hesitancy is something that can be discussed and talked about, the safety measures that are put in place. And again, looking at it from the school system side, they are trying to ensure that teachers and students are as safe as possible, because trying to think about it from the individual aspect, you have maybe mothers of newborns, people with elderly parents, and that is the risk that you're asking them to take on. That people have mentioned drunk driving a lot. This is not directly analogous to drunk driving. What this is really doing is saying, hey, if there was a drunk driver on the road next to you, imagine that you would also be drunk, and then now you're endangering everyone else in your car. So you need to be aware of where these drunk drivers are, and so that way you don't have that same risk. And again, it's not a great direct analogy, and I don't want to trivialize drunk driving or trivialize people's decision to get a vaccine, but it's a public safety issue, and that's what the school system is trying to do, and that's what the fire service and the police force and all of these are trying to do, is to make sure that people are going to have a lot of interactions per day with individuals and children are being as safe as possible. And we don't have any evidence right now that there are major long-term side effects to the vaccine. There is a lot of conspiracy right now, and conspiracy is not fact. And so I think that's what we're basing our decisions on. That's what every country in the world is basing their decisions on. It's also, yeah.
So this is from Rachel, who's a teacher. Rachel is a teacher who's watching in Raleigh, North Carolina. She says, forcing teachers to get vaccinated when we have a shortage of educators across the country is poor form and short-sighted.
Agreed. Right now we have that argument is not exclusive to education. There is pretty much
school bus drivers,
industry-wide
nurses
shortage. We can't find tutors. We can't. It's like there's a labor shortage just in general. So that is not exclusive to education. Again, I don't think it's in poor form. We need to remember that when these decisions come through, they have been discussed amongst the administration staff, amongst teachers. They brought it to the school board. School board has brought it to city council, and this is a decision for the betterment of the community, and that is my opinion, and I am sticking to it.
Yeah, I respect it. I respect it quite a bit. Sean Wick, welcome to the program, guys. Give the show a like and a share. 5 states watching the program. Blake, we will get to your comments. The self-appointed smartest man on the feed, according to Lee Elberson, Blake Hawthorne, watching the program. He has a couple of comments. First, Blake Hawthorne, is he in California?
He's in California.
Is agreeing or acknowledging Mark McKinney's great point, who's in Crozet. So this is a gentleman in California giving props to a gentleman in Crozet, Virginia.
Two smart guys, it sounds like.
Mark McKinney's a smart dude. He says, Mark McKinney makes a great point, but it's an impossible task to not be error-free. The problem is that any mistake is exploited, for lack of a better word, and uses the basis for the mistrust and argument against government. If any other entity, and instead of a dialogue, is met with a hardline opposition. Blake continues and he says, yellow journalism is not new, but the overview the last 30 years since the removal of the fairness and broadcasting doctrine, it was a slow slide into biased networking. But since the arrival of the internet and now social media and the smartphone, no journalistic integrity is the gold standard. All right, let's go down this road. Mark Zuckerberg is in front of the federal government right now. And a lot of chatter, especially from...
Do you want to give us the high-level point of what the whistleblower was accusing and why he's in front of it?
That's a good call. I should have done that. That's a very good call. So on Sunday, 60-minute interview, there was a whistleblower that worked for Facebook for a short period of time. Not long period of time. I think it was 2 years. This whistleblower, first she acknowledged who she was. So she went from being an anonymous whistleblower to saying, hey, this is me. And when she acknowledged who she was and put a face and name on camera, that led to more of a firestorm with this, because it wasn't just a source or an unnamed person. And the whistleblower said in this 60 Minutes interview that the Facebook algorithm and newsfeed prioritizes hate and divisive content and pushes hate and divisive content higher and more prioritized than news feeds, because hate and divisive content creates more engagement and more response, because it goes after a side of the brain of anger and hate and frustration. And Facebook, over a long period of time, has a hell of a lot of data points. And they realize that the emotions of anger and being pissed off and being frustrated gets more sharing and more commenting and more engagement. And Facebook's a publicly traded company. How they make their money, as you know, as most of the viewers know and listeners, is through metrics. As they get more page views, more shares of content, more liking of content, more commenting of content, they're able to monetize their platform more because they got more eyeballs, more time on site, less bounce rate, and more engagement. So they want people interacting with content. So this whistleblower says, Facebook, this is the whistleblower, is the anti-democracy. And now you have the Democrats, and I'm not going down the political road, this is all fact here. The Democrats are saying that perhaps Facebook should be have governmental control. There's a portion of the country that says social media should now become a public utility, which my side, that freaking blows my mind here, that some dude can create a company in Harvard, drops out of school. We've all seen The Social Network. And now he's one of the most powerful and influential and wealthiest people in the world. From my standpoint, I'm like, props to him. He busted his ass, gave up God knows what to get to this point, and now he should reap the fruits of his labor. We all, I don't want to speak for you, but we would all want a career trajectory or a CEO trajectory or a business trajectory of a Facebook. I mean, I certainly would. Okay, maybe you don't, okay? I mean, the guy worked his ass off, right? Yep. And now he's successful. Mm-hmm. So that's the Cliff Notes flip book. I'll open it up to you. Public utility, governmental control, anti-democracy for this social platform. Ironically, this show is streaming on said platform.
Of course, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ubiquitous.
Yeah, it's ubiquitous.
Yeah, okay, so a lot to unpack there. I think, I would like to grow my company. I want Clayborne to be a nationwide brand, and the likelihood of it becoming Facebook scale is, I would say, almost zero.
Right.
Very few companies are going to get to that level. When you have a publicly traded company, do you have
to put profits over people?
Yeah, your responsibility is not to science or the health of your users. It is to profitability and
your shareholders.
Yeah, your shareholders. You either keep the profits up or you can be fired or replaced unless you have a controlling interest on the board. So I think it's important to know that that's why they make decisions based on profit. In terms of what they knew about the algorithm, my limited experience with creating algorithms, I did it a bit in graduate school, and
Of course he did. Of course he did.
Yeah, well, of course. I love
professional poker player, rocket scientist.
Is plasma physicist.
Actually. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, laser fusion physicist is probably the most accurate. But
go ahead.
So in creating an algorithm, I can tell you that you don't usually go into it with nefarious attempt. A lot of it is just not understanding the contextualization of what the platform will do. So, for instance, I create an algorithm that says, okay, I want this laser to maximize the output in this certain particle. And it runs some calculation and says, and then turns off the laser. And it's like, wait, I told you to optimize it. It's like, that's the simplest thing to do is just turn off the laser. And it's like, oh, I forgot to give you the constraint. I do want it on. It needs to be doing something. And so I would imagine that this algorithm, they didn't specifically design it to say, hey, find the most hateful comments and find things that make people feel worse about themselves because they will stay on the program longer. It discovered those, and then once they discover them, they have to make an executive decision of saying, okay, this is the way to get the most number of viewers. Do we want to continue to do this, or where's our sense of morality, and should we get away from clicks and more time on screen for the betterment of our users? That's not a financially smart decision.
No.
From somebody who runs a business, though, there has to be some sort of morality in the company. Otherwise, it is just a machine that is going to continue to take advantage of its users. And that's why I hesitated when I said, I don't want to be in charge of a company like that. I want to be able to help set the morals of the company. And if I see something like that, be able to correct it. And so I think when a company has that much influence, and if the public sees something on Facebook and thinks it's correct, I don't think it's the craziest idea for the government to come in and say, hey, maybe if people are going to view it this way, maybe we need to make sure that we're monitoring the health of the American people and ensuring that they don't fall victim to misinformation, just as I can't go and sell something on the downtown mall and say, this juice will make you smarter, right? Maybe I put something in it that elevates them, some sort of stimulant or something. It's like, God, I do feel smarter. But in the long term, it's going to make them unhealthier, right? There's some sort of regulation for that. there's something very similar happening. It's a direct health concern if they're getting misinformation. So I don't think it's the craziest idea to have some sort of government oversight to monitor the information that people are getting, because it's unrealistic to say, well, you know what, everybody, you should just start reading peer-reviewed journal articles. That's good. You should go to scientifically backed research.
Okay, devil's advocate for the sake of a talk show. We'll get to your comments here. We have comments from Matthew, comments from Spencer, comments from Christopher. We will get to these comments here. It looks like Palm Beach, welcome to the program. Thank you kindly for joining us. Folks in Tallahassee, welcome to the program. Thank you kindly for joining us. If you allow the government to infiltrate business and moderate, supervise, dictate business, and perhaps Facebook needs a little bit of Big Brother oversight here, where does it stop?
Slippery slope.
That's the problem.
This is,
especially in the shadows of government mandating a vaccination.
Yeah, I mean, I think government is not, we're not talking about wide-scale implementation into all businesses, although we saw what happened with government surveillance programs like PRISM and how ubiquitous those came. It's like you just take an inch and then next thing you know, you just monitor everything. This is a very specific case where you have a company that's got a monopoly on how people consume information, and that could be used to their harm, and now it's coming out that they know it can be used to their harm, right? There was that comment about what it does for teenagers and people's sense of self-worth and
self-image.
Yeah,
especially for teenage girls.
Yeah.
And Facebook's considering a new Instagram platform geared at, Facebook owns Instagram, Facebook owns Messenger, Facebook owns WhatsApp.
Yeah.
Mark Zuckerberg is arguably one of the most powerful people in the world. And he's considering and working on a social platform, an Instagram version for teenagers. And there's indisputable evidence that Instagram, especially for teenage girls, it impacts self-worth, self-image, self-confidence, and causes depression because they see on these platforms that everyone is beautiful and gorgeous, when the reality is that beauty and that gorgeousness is often a filter of the platform.
Yep. So, yeah, going back to the problem of government intervention, I think as a progressive, I'm a supporter of, when you have new problems, having the government come in and introduce a solution. You know, this is a pretty new problem for us. In the past, when we gained information from our peers and from books, we had a really great way to benchmark it. If I'm in this studio and I'm telling everybody, hey, Judah, your dog's on fire, and Jerry says, no, the dog's not on fire. And Judah says, I can see that the dog's not on fire. You're crazy. I'm just not going to listen to you. Now we don't have this idea of how unique an idea is, right? Is this like, do 100 million people support this, and is this scientifically backed, or is this just one person that's been promoted, and are you just continuing to see these stories? And so we've lost that ability to be able to filter and benchmark where we're getting our information, and we're only getting it from one platform that doesn't have our best interests at heart. I think that warrants government intervention, because what that whistleblower has shown is that they're not going to, why would they self-regulate? It's not going to be as profitable for them. They don't have any reason not to continue with profitability. Mark Zuckerberg's got plans to keep acquiring and just take on more, and just like the government broke up Baby Bell, you know, maybe it's time to sort of break up this monopoly on where people get their information.
Wow, I did not expect that take from you. I appreciate it, though. Christopher Dunn says, what your guest is missing, Christopher Dunn's watching in Tallahassee, what your guest is missing is Facebook is not a publisher of content. They are the gateway of the content. The publisher of the content is their users. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that comment, Christopher Dunn, but show is yours on that. You're the guest, Lee.
Yeah, I'm not missing it, and that's a good point. But there's plenty of I publish a blog, there's tons of stuff out there. But if I decide to publish a blog and it gets put in, the New York Times picks it up and it gets trending on every single social media platform, and they collectively do that, then it's almost irrelevant what the content is, because the person pushing the content and gaining viewership is determining what the lead story should be. So I think that's what we're talking about here, is not that they are purposefully, again, I don't think it was, they went into it saying, hey, let's try to push hateful stories and let's try to make people feel worse about themselves. They did the analytics and realized, this is how we're making our money. Should we change this? Should we think about the morality of this? And I think that's what we're getting at here. Not that they are going in and intentionally did it from the onset. Now they know about it, and what should they do about it, and what, should the government step in and control that?
This comment comes in from Kevin Higgins. Kevin Higgins, we'll get to this in a matter of moments. Mark McKinney's got to follow as well on the show. Guys, give the show a like and a share anywhere you're watching. Kevin Higgins for Lee Elberson. I think we are stuck as a country in regard to vaccinations. Sure, there has been significant progress on shots, but resistance to these shots remains strong. It will only intensify as mandates are put on children. I feel like we are in a helicopter that has stalled. What recovery options do we have, and how do we change course?
Boy, if I had the answer to this question, I think I'd be a billionaire.
I know you would. Me too. That's the beautiful thing about this show is with viewers and listeners from everywhere, like some of these folks, like, really put thoughtful perspective into it. And guys, I'm throwing this stuff to Lee. It's a testament to him and all our guests on the fly. Like, this came in 1 minute ago, and I'm throwing it to you on the fly, and we had no plan of going down this road.
No.
This was not even on the outline for the show.
No, we haven't.
He has the outline.
Yeah,
it's not even on the outline.
Who cares about the outline now? Yeah. I think, again, it's important to have conversations with people. The two categories, again, that I've outlined are anti-vaxxers who feel like it's infringing on their rights and are going to be resistant of it, regardless of whether or not the science says that it's going to be beneficial. And then the vaccine hesitant crowd, which thinks that it's come up too fast. They're worried about long-term side effects. Again, just what the data shows is that the first group, anti-vaxxers, tend to be conservative, white, evangelical groups, and the other group, vaccine hesitant, covers quite a bit of the socioeconomic spectrum and is much more diverse. And so in listening to those two groups, it's important to understand what the end game is. I'm not going to go down the anti-vaxxer trail right now, but let's think about vaccine hesitant. What is the end game? Is it ideally to just not take the vaccine, and then once COVID numbers have subsided enough and the death rate is lower and hospitalization is lower, then it won't be a problem for them? I could imagine that's one avenue. If maybe you either think or you do have a pre-existing medical condition that you don't want to take any chances by getting the vaccine, that's a slippery slope, because I think no one wants to take unnecessary risk. But again, the long-term side effects of getting COVID, it's beyond just death. It's long-term respiratory issues, even for people who are healthy. We don't have enough data to say which one is more risky, long-term side effects of the vaccine or long-term side effects of the COVID vaccine. We do know that short-term side effects, it's much more geared towards take the vaccine and avoid getting it and avoid infecting others. So by putting the vaccine mandate in, I think the government and employers are trying to show that they have enough confidence with FDA approval and not seeing any scientifically documented significant side effects, that this is the play we need to make for public health. And the timing of it, if we just keep waiting, COVID in the US is just going to keep, we're going to keep getting more and more mutations. It's going to keep being a persistent problem. Some argue it's already going to be a decade-long problem for us, given how we've handled it. So I don't see any problem with making the vaccine mandates. Again, the calculus in terms of what are the effects I'm going to feel from getting the vaccine versus if I get COVID or potentially expose someone else to COVID, I think it's far outweighed. Much better to get the vaccine. And I look to a field of scientific research and people that I respect, and all of them have gotten the vaccine, and so that's why I support it.
Brian Coppinger in Roanoke, Virginia, has a very pointed question for you.
Oh gosh!
And Brian Coppinger,
I'm always in the hot seat here, Jerry.
Well, I mean that's a good thing about you is you can adapt. You can adapt. Brian Coppinger says, "I fall in that first group that Lee has recognized when it comes to this vaccination. Jerry is the host of the show. You should be asking this question." Brian, I appreciate your aggressiveness here. He says, "Jerry is the host of the show. You should be asking your guests this question. Will he require the vaccination for his employees at his business, and will he require the vaccination of customers that patronize his business? Thank you, and please ask this." Brian and Roanoke.
Great question. To the first question, we have outlined, we haven't yet required COVID vaccines for our employees or for our customers. We've been very lucky not to have an issue with our employees getting vaccines. If 50% of our staff was refusing to get the vaccine, I acknowledge the fact that I would be in a really tough position. In the middle of a labor crisis, I am going to be telling people get the vaccine or go somewhere else, putting my business at risk because I wouldn't be able to fulfill the service of the business that we're getting. However, I think as a business owner, I've been very lucky to be able to structure it in such a way that if my employees are not going to get vaccinated, they are required to wear a mask, and we do contact tracing, and I have consistent conversations with my employees asking about their COVID status and offering myself as a resource if they have any questions about it. In terms of customers, our policy is that all unvaccinated customers are required to wear a mask, just as the CDC recommends. And we're moving now towards not requiring, but recommending that everyone wear a mask, given the uncertainty in vaccination status. So if I were in a different position, I'm not entirely sure what I would do. If 50% of my staff refused to get vaccinated, I would probably restructure my business such that I would ask them, I would not allow them to come into the office and say, hey, you guys are going to be offering virtual tutoring, and in-person will be left for vaccinated staff. Again, I'm looking at the health of fellow staff members who have expressed concern, and I'm looking at the health of my customers who have also asked questions about vaccination status of my employees. I know that doesn't specifically answer the question, but
I mean, I thought you answered it extremely well, considering you just got that question on the fly. And really, there's a lot of uncertainty here, so I thought you navigated that well. This is another pointed question here. This is from Leslie Reed for the both of us. Jerry and guest, we moved from Charlottesville, specifically Albemarle County, to Florida because of how the school system was treating our 3 boys and what was required of them. In Florida, the requirements are very different than Albemarle County, and I feel our 3 boys, and she lists their age, I feel our 3 boys are back to being boys again, as opposed to agents or followers of our governmental educational system. She says this, if we continue down this road, we're not going to have any teachers, any school bus drivers, any school nurses, any folks working in the cafeteria. Florida and Albemarle County are two very different states. There seems to be freedom here. There seems to be not the employee crisis here, and the schools are working just fine.
Lot to unpack there as well. I grew up in Louisiana, second to the bottom in terms of education standards. I don't know the number right off the bat, but I know Virginia is higher than Florida in terms of the level of education that you receive. For better or worse, again, I grew up in Louisiana all the way at the bottom, and I made it through college just fine.
Yeah, and your mom's watching. Hello, Cindy.
And my mom's watching. So I think this is really causing a divide in our country. You know, the lack of COVID restrictions and sort of the anti-mask movement that comes out of some of the southern states has made it so that it feels more free there. I know I watch a lot of YouTube videos on Jeep jamborees there, and I don't see a mask in sight. And it does feel like, you know, back to the way it was, right? It does feel like, hey, we're getting back to how things were. And I think that's part of what we're feeling, and that's what I can empathize with when somebody says, these are my freedoms, and I didn't have to do this 2 years ago. The reality is people are dying. Hospitals in states with lower mask restrictions do have a higher percentage of ICU admittance, and the hospitals are more burdened in those areas. And that is a real toll. And when you look at death counts, it is higher. And so that's part of the calculus. In enjoying that freedom, you are going to increase the chance that there is going to be public impact, and it's different because you're making a choice that affects others. And I think that's why it's not so cut and dry. And I think that's why we're having a discussion, is that everyone recognizes that there's a very small subset of people who think that COVID is a hoax, right? I think that's a very fringe group. I think most people recognize that it's real. It's just the immediate effects that you're seeing. And so I definitely understand the difference between living in Florida and living in Virginia. And I think we need more conversations like this. We need people to have more empathy. Otherwise, in 10 years, does the country just divide and we say, this is basically where we're drawing the line. We believe in this and you believe in this. I think that would be absolutely catastrophic for our country. And so we need to have more conversations and come to more common ground.
Great take right there from Lee Elberson. Back to the social media topic, we have Richmond on the feed. We have a great contingent of followers and listeners in Richmond. For those that are watching in Richmond or Short Pump, thank you. We try to highlight things for you to do in Charlottesville on the show. And we also know that there's a strong UVA alumni base in Richmond and Short Pump. We very much appreciate Richmond on this market. I think it's probably our third largest market of watchers and listeners. We'll call Charlottesville, Albemarle County 1 and 2, Richmond 3. Question
real quick, can I ask
sure.
a question? How much time do we have left on the show?
We can go as much as you want.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
cool. I do want to let's make sure we save some time for climate change.
Yeah, we're going to talk climate change,
Okay, cool.
and he's also got some, because I have an outline, which we really haven't even hit the outline at all, just which speaks to Lee's ability to adapt on the fly. We have some St. Anne's Belfield Academy fast facts.
Yeah,
that
St.
we need
Anne's
to.
versus CHS, just to kind of put people, we talk a lot about independent schools versus public schools.
So private schools versus public schools.
Yep.
Okay, so this topic has come up. It sounds like your guess is all for regulating Facebook. Does he feel the same way of some of the lower on the totem pole social channels like Twitter, like TikTok, and like LinkedIn?
Yeah, I mean, TikTok and Twitter may not have necessarily the same absolute numbers, but in terms of growth, I think they both can. They've both shown, well, TikTok has shown tremendous growth.
It's booming.
Twitter has probably stabilized. I think the type of media and the population with which you serve, TikTok tends to skew much younger. Facebook tends to skew older. TikTok is very short format. You're not I mean, the messaging there I think is different. Maybe it's more fun-natured, whereas Facebook is meant and sort of touts itself sometimes as, hey, we can raise awareness for these stories, right? And so I think if there is disinformation being spread in these platforms that's causing public health crisis or causing individuals to feel worse about themselves, I think you should regulate across the platforms and not necessarily treat Facebook separately, although I think Facebook has more reach given the ownership of the properties that they have, but it should be set as a policy for all organizations. When an organization gets to be hundreds of billions of dollars, then it's a publicly traded company that is not seeking the health of its users as its primary interest.
Mark McKinney, regarding Facebook, regulations are needed to protect the legitimate interests of both businesses and the community. However, regulations can and do go too far that restrict businesses and entrepreneurship. Amen. The more red tape you put in place, small local businesses will fail and only large businesses will succeed. Amen. There is a moral and ethical manner to operating a business. There is also a moral and ethical manner for government to impose regulations. Mark McKinney, amen. I could give a perfect example for this, which I've learned from our friends, Quentin Beckham and Keith Smith, from one of our clients, a developer and home builder that we represent. 24% of the cost of new construction of a home is associated with governmental red tape and bureaucracy. A $400,000 newly constructed home, roughly $100K of that is tied to paperwork and hoops the builder has to jump through at the local and higher level. And the unfortunate aspect of that statistic, in fact, is the big builders, the mass production builders with significant cash positions on their balance sheet are able to navigate constructing new homes at a quicker clip, in part because of this red tape. 24% of new home construction is tied to red tape and bureaucracy. So Mark, that's a good example of what you're talking about here. We are going to get to climate change. Jennifer is watching in Waynesboro. She says, Jerry, you posted a photo of the Ednum sandwich from Bel Air Market on your feed. Oh. Make sure you ask your guest what his favorite Sammy is from the markets at Tiger Fuel. That might be your favorite question so far right there. You want to answer that, and then we'll get to St. Anne's Belfield versus Charlottesville High School quick facts?
Yeah, let's do that. I will say, being somebody, I shouldn't tout myself as a vegan because I eat eggs. I don't eat meat, I don't eat dairy, I don't eat chicken. And so when I go to the market, they have, I forgot what it's called. Whatever, they have a veggie sandwiches like cucumber, hummus, and whatnot, and that's good enough for me. I would say my new favorite sandwich is at Dairy Market. Green Burger has a vegan chicken sandwich. Get habaneros on it. Oh my gosh, I could eat 2 of those a day. My buddy Tim turned me on to those.
I spoke to Chris Henry this morning. Chris Henry, the guy, the visionary behind Dairy Market. You're doing a hell of a job. In fact, I will tag Chris Henry on the feed here. All right, let's go quick facts. Public school versus private school, and we're localizing this topic. Charlottesville High School, a public school, the Black Knights. St. Anne's Belfield Academy, a private school, the Saints. Show is yours.
Yeah, so I always just try to put things into perspective because in my position, I get asked questions from people along the entire socioeconomic spectrum, but as you move up the socioeconomic ladder, I think for parents, one of the natural thoughts is, should I put my child in private school, or otherwise called independent schools, or should I put them in public school? And
my wife and I are having that conversation.
Yeah, there's so many different factors that go into it, and let's start with resources. I mean, it's when you look at the amount of resources that go per student per year, just in our area, and this is probably not that uncommon nationwide, is you're going to see about double the number of resources at an independent school like St. Anne's versus Charlottesville High School. Those resources go it's not just to staffing, but that is a big part of it. It's staffing. It's the college counseling environment. Most independent schools will call themselves college preparatory schools because they are preparing your child for college. And as Frank Friedman from PVCC has said in many articles, and he said on my podcast, going to some sort of college, whether it's community college or college, improves earning potential, improves quality of life. It's tied to health. It's tied to longevity. It's tied to so many things. So obviously parents want their kids to attend some sort of college. So that's part of what goes into the resources. It obviously increases the teacher-to-student ratio. St. Anne's versus CHS is not as extreme as you might think. It's about 33% greater teacher-to-student ratio at St. Anne's. In terms of what this means for standardized tests, again, whatever you feel about standardized tests, I like the fact that you can have a benchmark which you can measure some couillon from Louisiana like myself and some really smart woman like my wife from California. Couillon, for those of you who don't know, is Cajun term for some it's like, who's this couillon right here? So if you ever hear somebody say couillon, it's usually a term of endearment. So anyway.
What's the synonym for couillon in
I mean, I don't know,
dude?
Yeah, a little bit like dude, but just like mischievous dude. It's just like, what you doing, couillon?
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, to be able to measure those two, despite what, there's obviously a resource gap that causes there to be an issue, but assuming that the family has the same amount of resources, you're going to be able to measure that. So in looking at it, the average SAT scores from a school like CHS, you're going to see it's going to be about 60th percentile. At a school like St. Anne's is going to be about 80th percentile.
That's a pretty big delta.
That's a pretty big delta. There's also probably a selection bias here that the students who are going to attend St. Anne's already have resources and are already likely going to score higher. So I don't know if you could necessarily tie that to academics. I think one of the other important things, and this is something that you will see if you look at CHS Fast Facts and you look at St. Anne's Fast Facts, it's diversity. You're going to have a lot more diversity at a school like Charlottesville High School. Diverse opinions, diverse viewpoints, socioeconomic diversity, and that is something that we should
that has
strive
value
for.
Value proposition.
Yeah, always want to have more diversity. So I think it's interesting to sort of look at. So those are just my fast facts when people are trying to make this decision.
Mark says, gentlemen, I applaud you both for being civil and hosting an honest and open dialogue with listeners. The topics you've discussed need to happen more throughout our society. I enjoy listening to both of you. Climate change. Blake Hawthorne, I am not going to read this climate. I know this is a tongue-in-cheek climate, but some people may misconstrue me saying your comment live on air, and next thing you know, I'll have a soundbite. I will acknowledge your tongue-in-cheek comment, though, Blake Hawthorne. My friend... You don't want to.
Blake's very witty. Yeah, I'm gonna have to go back and look at it later.
I'll tell you off air. Climate change. Show's yours.
Okay, so let's first acknowledge facts. 99% of climate scientists agree that our climate is changing, and that it is due to some of the changes that Homo sapiens have done to our environment. Again, we look at
people.
We look at localized, trying to think about it localized. I think it's major issue globally, right? God, it's the entire globe is going to change. Yeah, okay. So what? What does that mean for me? I'm just some guy who lives in Charlottesville. So I think there's a lot that you have to consider if you're thinking, how can I make an impact with climate change? Assuming I think that these scientists are correct, and I do want to try to improve the climate, what can I personally do? When you look at what happens when we have carbon introduced into the atmosphere, a lot of it has to do with food sourcing. If I go and buy milk or eggs from Kroger, sure, I'm going to get it for much cheaper, but there's a pretty big carbon footprint associated with transporting it there and keeping that running. So considering where do you source your food? Farmers market is a great place to source not only local foods, so you're supporting a local business, you're reducing your carbon offset, and it's more likely a healthier choice. If you're going to buy something even similar at Kroger, you're actually probably going to pay more. If you buy just the cheapest like Cisco eggs you can possibly find there, you kind of get what you pay for. You can expect that's coming from a profit-oriented organization that's trying to churn out as many eggs as possible. And if that means confining the chickens to close quarters and they have more disease, that's probably what's going to happen. So look at where you source your food. Go to the farmers markets. There's a growing movement in and around Charlottesville of like local shares. Bel Air does a really great share, and then start growing your own cilantro. My wife loves buying basil plants and growing basil plants and cilantro, and so I think food sourcing is something that you can do immediately. Second thing, transportation. When I was traveling in Ireland, it made me think of when I was traveling in Germany, and I was traveling in France many, many years ago. And, we are a very individualized nation, right? When you look at much older nations, you go out to places like Egypt and Africa when there's thousands and thousands of years, it's much more community focused. And so people assume that they are going to share rides, they're going to collectively go places. In America, it's like, no, I need my own car because I need to decide what I'm going to do at every moment. That's fine. But if you can find a way to carpool with people, again, you would be cutting your carbon footprint in half if you just take one other person in the car. If you fill up and put 4 people in your car, you're cutting the carbon offset by 75%. That's great. Unfortunately, we don't have great public transportation in the U.S. in general, but especially in Charlottesville. I know to get from downtown to my office at Woodbrook, it takes an hour and a half by bus. I can drive my car there and be there in 12 minutes.
How about walking?
Walking, yes, definitely.
How long would it take you to get there walking? Or jogging?
My buddy Tim jogged there I think it took him an hour and 20 minutes.
So basically the same as the bus.
Yeah. You could walk there faster than...
That's nuts.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate.
Yeah. So, this is what we lobby community members, and we go to people like Juan Diego Wade, who's running for city council and has put climate change and transportation as some of his issues, and say, we want better transportation, right? We talked about this last time. Can we get UVA to co-op with us and create a transportation system along 29 to downtown to make it easier for us? The last thing is energy usage. I, for the longest time, was very terrible about leaving lights on, and it's like, I'm a physicist, so I like to calculate things in terms of percentages, and I thought, if I leave the light on, it's like costing me $2 a month to leave the light on all the time. The hassle for me to have to go and turn off, it's not worth it for me.
So if you leave all the lights on in your house?
A light bulb.
Oh, one light bulb.
Yeah, that was incandescent. I did this a long time ago with a kilowatt meter. But now with LED lights, it's probably less than that. And so in thinking about the things that take the most energy are things that burn off electrons. These are ovens and heaters. Anything that does that is going to use a lot of energy. And so even just monitoring your energy shortage or your energy usage is very similar to when you start monitoring what you eat. How many of us look at a label of something that comes in a package before you eat it? I do, because I'm looking for things that I don't want to eat, like anything that is like inverted high fructose corn syrup. I think if you've got to invert it and it's high fructose, that's got to be really terrible for you. So similarly, if you start paying attention to where you use your energy, you're going to be more conscious, and then you're going to probably lobby your local government to make similar changes of saying, hey, do you have to leave the lights on in the pavilion all the time, or can you only do it during a show? Again, I'm just using an example. I don't know if those are actually on. And the final thing is composting. Composting is getting big here in Charlottesville.
Oh my gosh. Alex just said, how about composting? Black Bear Composting picks up in Charlottesville.
That's why we do composting in my house, because my wife is big into like making small changes that have big impact. So she got us into composting. It's great because then you're really looking at what you eat, and it's like, wow, we didn't eat any vegetables this week. That's bad. Health scientists always say eat more vegetables is a healthier choice. There's no debating that. So that, and then again, the one thing that's near and dear to me is I love using Ziploc bags. Big Ziploc bag thing. I had a big collection of them when I first met Alex, and she's finally got me into using these reusable things, which everything...
Is that Tupperware?
It's a glass Tupperware, but also there's like bags. Like they're like these thick polymer bags, and then you put stuff in and you can just wash them and reuse them. So instead of just consistently going through Ziploc bags, and all this stuff sounds little, but if everybody does this, it can make big impact. And again, it's just sort of like, what are you doing to sort of raise awareness for what's happening, and realizing that, wow, there is a lot of waste that I contribute to. So
she's proud of you.
She is president of my fan club, co-president of my fan club.
Yeah, Cindy's watching in Louisiana. So a couple more questions here.
Let me ask you, are those any things that you pay attention to, Mr. Miller?
So it's funny you brought this up. So growing up, my dad, huge influence, like a lot of sons, their fathers, huge influences on them. And my dad is an entrepreneur, sold a couple businesses. He's a CPA by trade. And as a CPA, he sees ways to save everywhere. That's what he does. He's a CPA. And he would constantly be walking throughout the house, turning off the light switches, turning off the TVs my brother and I left on, just penny pinching, if you may, right? And now that I am a husband and a father myself, I find myself walking around the house, turning off the lights, turning off Netflix, Amazon Prime. We've chosen a garbage company that prioritizes recycling.
Oh, great.
Okay, that prioritizes...
single stream?
Yeah, single stream, when others have not. We have prioritizing the limiting of multi-car use when not needed. When maybe I'm waiting around a little bit longer for my wife to come, or she's waiting around a little bit longer.
Oh boy, that's not good. I don't know that game.
You know that game,
yeah.
Right? So we've been doing that.
What about food sourcing? Keswick, does it have a farmer's market?
Keswick does not have a farmer's market, but we do enjoy going to the farmer's market at Ix Park. Since we've had our son's 3.5, we are very mindful, even more so, of our diet. Because we have a little boy who depends on us for his health and his livelihood, and
he's also going to pick up your habits, right?
He picks up our habits constantly.
Yeah,
he's a parrot, a mimic, and I've gone from someone who loves to use the F word, because I find the F word to be incredibly dynamic, to someone who's now saying fudge or sugar, because my little boy was using the F word, and he didn't necessarily know what it meant, but I would hear him say the F word, and I'm like, oh my God, I got to change things here. Oh. So it's now fudge and sugar. So there's just a lot of pressure. And I will say this, parenthood, and I don't want to speak for my wife, but I think she would agree, has made us better people, and I would characterize parenthood as the best, hardest thing ever, and the longest, shortest thing ever. The days feel like years, but the years go by like they're days. Couple more questions for you. When Lee Elberson comes on the program, we often have our longest versions of our show because of his big, beautiful brain. And frankly, I think he and I have very good chemistry in a show setting like this.
Agreed.
Kevin Higgins, for you specifically, have benchmarks on standardized tests changed for children during the pandemic, Lee? Did expectations shift during virtual learning? What concerns do you have with children that are still in virtual learning, Lee? Thank you.
Boy, that's an excellent question. Who was that from?
Kevin Higgins.
Kevin, yeah, great question. Standardized test scores have dropped. and even more significantly so in under-resourced populations. So minority populations and anyone who doesn't have resources have seen bigger declines. And so this goes into the bigger discussion of like what's called learning loss. And there's a couple of different schools. There was a few schools of thought on how to cope with learning loss, which we can get into in a second. But in discussing virtual learning, I think what we have discovered is that group virtual learning is fairly ineffective with younger children. Even as you get older into middle and high school, virtual group learning has to be extraordinarily dynamic and interactive in order to sustain their attention and keep the buy-in. And if you don't have training for that, which most teachers don't, we didn't have that when they were trained going to school, where you're going to see probably effectively only like 50 to 60% transmission of information as you would over an in-person setting. So I think what we need to do is to not think about this as a binary decision, in-person versus virtual, which there's a lot of arguments get framed in that. We need to think about them as complementary. What can virtual do well? We know that virtual private tutoring works really well. There's a lot of advocates, certainly myself, and I will say I own a tutoring company, so I admit my own biases, but a one-to-one interaction is highly personalized, and whether that's in person or it's virtual, that is extremely impactful. So finding ways, if they are going to be virtual, could it be during an office hour setting with either one-to-one or very small group setting so every student feels heard? And what can be leveraged in an asynchronous or virtual learning environment that can be used in conjunction with in-person accountability and structure. And so I think that's the conversation that needs to be had. In terms of learning loss, there's a growing field of academics, or a growing pool of academics who think we shouldn't be worried about picking up the learning loss. You know, it was just something. It happened. There's nothing we could do. We did the best we could with a tough situation.
You follow that mindset? You agree with that?
No.
Yeah.
I tend to think that we have had failing education standards, and this is going to sound ironic coming from me, that we were too emphasized on standardized testing such as SOLs and SATs to some extent, although in the school system, SATs were not necessarily taught to. They were used as a benchmark. Kids rarely ever did preparation for PSATs. Teachers really didn't do anything about them. It was just to sort of benchmark how they're doing on a national scale. And you could certainly improve that benchmark, but if you tell a teacher that the goal is to get a student to pass an SOL, then it's an algorithmic approach. They're going to do whatever it takes to get as many of those students over the line.
Teach the test.
Teach to the test. And many teachers don't think that is the best way to approach it, but we do need to have some benchmarks. So I do think that there are ways to combat learning loss. We have a mental health crisis. We talked about this during Mental Health Month. There is a major decline in the mental health of students during the pandemic, especially ones in a virtual setting. So I think we need to prioritize students' social emotional needs, and that sounds like very hippie, new agey, and coming from a hard scientist, it's sometimes tough for me to realize that I do believe in this, but if a student is not, well, I guess I'll say this, most jobs now would prioritize emotional intelligence over IQ, so in actual intelligence, and that's because you need to be able to, yeah. There's a major group with few. There's certainly in EPS firms, elite professional institutions like management consulting, investment banking, and top tier law firms. You know, it's test scores. We just want the smartest kid in the room, and that's who we're going to hire. It's a very small subset of total jobs. many jobs you have to do a lot of problem solving and interact with others and have empathy. And so if somebody has high emotional intelligence and social awareness, they're likely to be a good employee. And so that's why we should prioritize as a school system to make sure that we are meeting their social and emotional needs. I think another thing we should do is use this as an opportunity. We've talked about this in business a lot. The system is failing. It failed by the benchmarks that we had. Great, let's use this as an opportunity to rethink what we're actually benchmarking. And maybe this means that we elongate the school year, right? It's tough to consider that right now because we have a teacher shortage, but there's shortages in pretty much every industry. Maybe that means that Fridays are asynchronous days. Maybe the students come in and there's less teacher load on Fridays because they are at the school for structure and accountability, but utilizing virtual resources so that teachers can have more one-to-one time with the students that need it the most. I don't know the exact solution, but I do know that we should be having more of these wild idea conversations about how to move education forward. So that was way off track.
That was great.
From what the question was asked. What was Kevin's original question?
Kevin's original question, I think you certainly answered it. Cindy Elberson says she loves the reusables. By the way, that's your ma, as you know.
Yeah.
She says, have benchmarks on standardized tests changed during the pandemic?
So I went into a little tirade there.
Did expectations shift during virtual learning, and what concerns do you have with children that are still in virtual learning?
Yeah, okay. So answer the question, just did it probably pretty long.
Nikki Hernandez, hello, a fabulous pickleball player that I play pickleball with. Nikki Hernandez, I'm really
I want to play pickleball. I've never played.
I'm getting super hardcore into pickleball, super hardcore. Nikki Hernandez, she was a guest on the show. She's a published author. Nikki, you and Lee Elberson should undoubtedly meet. Nikki Hernandez's book is, hold on, I'm going to look it up, Nikki, so I make sure I don't mess this up. I'm Googling it as we speak. Nikki, I'm going to get this right. She's a teacher at William & Rowe. Empowering Gen Z. Empowering Gen Z. She's the author behind the book. It's available for sale on Amazon. She says, I wish I could watch longer. I got to go teach class right now. Way to go, Jerry and Lee. And she says she's absolutely down to meet you and potentially join us for a roundtable. So we got more topics coming in. If I did not, so I Love CVille, V&V brands. You see two brands behind us here. I Love CVille, which we're most known for, is this podcasting network and this platform where we showcase the best of Charlottesville, Virginia. V&V Brands is a brand management company and advertising agency where we manage brands for clients. If I did not have a boatload of work to get to, I would continue to spend some time with my friend Lee Elberson. It is now 2:07, but we have notes from viewers and listeners on topics they want us to cover down the road.
Okay.
So one of them that I think is 100% up your alley is electric vehicles. And the push for EVs is you save money on gas, it's better for the environment, they're getting more approachable and more affordable from a price standpoint. Faster, sexier in design, right? The Tesla is a great looking vehicle, right? It's a beautiful car.
Yeah.
So this comment has come in about electric vehicles for you. We cannot get to this today, and frankly would want Lee to prepare for this because I know this is right up his alley, and he would knock our socks off. He says, and this is from Spencer, who is watching in Richmond, the world is not prepared for electric vehicles. If you charge your electric vehicle on your street, if your neighbor charges his electric vehicle on the street, if the entire street's powering their vehicles with electric vehicles, we do not have the infrastructure in place. That's what he said.
Yeah, that's 100% accurate. I've done some research. I'd love to talk more about this and talk about the scaling of it. But yeah,
he said it would crash the country.
Yeah, we
is that a fair statement?
Yeah, definitely.
Crash the country?
Yeah, we couldn't 100% switch to electric vehicles right now, which is why hybrids are a good compromise.
So, well, Spencer, we will continue this. I promise you, the next edition of the episode of the I Love CVille Show. Blake, Lee, you were and are as smart a human as I'll ever know. But when you were locked away to yourself in that room, slaving to the virtual remote desk back in 2008, working on your education as well as being taken advantage of by your boss, you were the epitome of what can happen. The lack of social interaction that kids and all of us need.
Very
Good
true.
Lord, Blake, be nice to your friend there.
Yeah, Blake pulled me out of some dark times. Yeah, I didn't have any social interactions. So, yeah, and that's why I can speak intelligently about what happens when you're in that sort of state. So.
Kevin, if we rally around learning loss with kids from this pandemic and become visual on effects of COVID in hospitals with patients dying on gurneys, suffocating to death, we will move forward. It's going to be very slow, but children are our future, and they are losing out because of us adults. They are our future, and we are effing it up for them. Adults are the problem, not the government. It's us. We are effing this up for our kids. No one to blame but us. Wow. Kevin, I appreciate your comment. I hope that's not the case, especially as the parent of a 3-year-old. Lee Elberson, 2:10 p.m., my friend, closing thoughts.
Well, just want to say thanks so much for having me. I think this sort of long-form debate is what is needed more than short-form one-paragraph posts on Facebook. So we appreciate it. The more people can get involved and ask us questions, I think this is a great format for it, and I would love to have future shows where we use this board table and have more guests. And thanks to Jerry and Judah for having me on.
Go to the studio camera, Judah, so the viewers can see the new boardroom table. Neil Williamson, this is your influence here on the I Love CVille Network. I hope you're still watching me, Neil. Lee Elberson is the CEO of Clayborne Education. He is an A++ dude, as Blake has just acknowledged, one of the greatest dudes I know.
And CFO of 8 Hats.
Oh, yeah? Jared.
Yeah. Yep.
Jared is working in
Louisiana. Yeah.
Your brother-in-law.
My brother-in-law. He's killing it right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
8 Hats is doing very well.
And the chairman of the Community Investment Collaborative.
Chairman of the Community Investment Collaborative and the chairman of the Better Future Foundation.
And the husband to Fabulous Alex.
I don't know how I got so lucky, but I did.
There you go. And the son of Cindy.
Yes. Very lucky there as well.
There you go. Judah Wickower is the director. Lee Elberson. My name is Jerry Miller. This is the I Love CVille Show. Tomorrow, we have Kate Lucas, who's an entrepreneur that's launching a nonprofit, a new version of the turkey trot around Thanksgiving. And then also on tomorrow's show, architect Hank Brown, a world-renowned architect. Hank Brown, a visionary who was the architect behind the Charlottesville Ice Park, was the architect behind our building, the Macklin building here on Market Street, and an architect behind real estate all over the world. Hank Brown on tomorrow's show. The gentleman, I believe, is 91 years old. Wow. So we are going to have 5 decades, actually 6 decades, I think he said, over 6 decades of architectural experience on tomorrow's program, along with the entrepreneur, realtor, and now philanthropist Kate Lucas on the I Love CVille Show. Thank you kindly for joining us. For Judah and Lee, I'm Jerry. Have a good afternoon. Take care. Good job, Judah. Nicely done. Lee.
I forgot to ask you, have you started on range yet?